Mr. Saxena, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Good, absolutely. Thank you so much and good morning. Good to see you always. The energy and the passion which you bring in.
Thank you so much, sir. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. It's taken us some time. It's taken us some time, but like I said, right, all good things, come with a little bit of a wait, and by the end of it, the results are amazing, right? So, this was a session which was pending, right, and more importantly, given the work that you've done in education, and I think given the phase that education has kind of gone through in the last 1.5 years, right, I think we're in a very different the expectation from the education ecosystem or education market, or I think education providers overall, right, has changed completely. The industry is now operating at a different level. Us as parents are expecting completely different output of education institutions, right? So the entire model of education has kind of gone through a massive change. And then I think in an environment like that, to have you with us, somebody who's championed school education, build many institutions on the higher ed side of things, is phenomenal, because now we sort of get to talk of a continuous process, right? And I think the new initiatives that you kind of bringing in, establishing, which are relatively new in country, are phenomenal, right? So I think there's a huge there are many dynamics to this entire conversation. There are many facets to it. I think the stakeholders, the behavior has changed completely, right? And I think I'll try and cover that through the course of this conversation, Mr. Sena.
Sure.
But before we
Sure.
start all of that, right, I'd love you to take us through a quick round of, a quick introduction to yourself. You've been deep in education, like I said. I'd love you to cover some of that, and then we, start the discussion for the day.
Great. So, when you talk about the changes which is happening as far as the education per se is concerned, I think there are two ways of looking at things. One is the new education policy was in place, which was talking about more of getting away from the rote learning and getting away into the more of a the practical orientation of the education. While in 2020, which has happened, we also completely struck by this pandemic thing. So not that the technology was not in place, it was happening earlier as well, but the space was very slow. The orientation of the faculty as well as the parents were not there. As you said, right now the stakeholders are much more aligned to the fact that they really wanted to get along with the virtual mode of education, which was very less minimalistic, I would say. Some of the efforts made by some of the companies in past to bring that smart school wherein technology intervention was there, but I think largely it remained as a marketing tool rather than actual acceptance um, of the very thought which originated with bringing those things. But pandemic has put the entire thing on a very fast track now. Year one, each school, I would say, any of the board in India or worldwide, we have all struggled because teachers were not aligned to the technology. It's like every word was a Greek to them, and so is the parents, so is the students. But I think each one of us also came together very fast, and after 1 month's training, intense training, we all have learned what is the way forward and experimented many things. So and I think today you absolutely right. As parent, student, faculty, all are aligned with the vision that virtual or the technology-based studies is the way forward. And there are many interesting development has taken place. We have India's first virtual school, which is coming up in south of India. Of course, South always takes a lead in technology, when it comes to technology. But I think, yes, slowly, gradually, this could be one of the very important tool in taking forward the education. But we also must not forget that, India, there is a huge digital divide, and we have experienced such things in our schools. Parents who have a siblings does not have either the data or the multiple laptops at home. So those challenges are there, which we will overcome, of course, in times to come. But yes, today when you talk about the newer way of teaching, yes, technology is there. Many companies in edtech has popped up, trying to bridge the gap as much as possible at a very affordable cost as well, which is very heartening to see. A great content is reaching out to the everyone, irrespective of their caste, creed, religion, demography, wherever it is. But then the education is reaching out. and you can see the results as well. So we are far off as educationists. If I have to say, we are far better than compared to 2020 in 2021.
Interesting.
And God forbid if this third wave or many such things keeps coming, I think education would not suffer as we have experienced in past.
Super.
So yes.
Sorry, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So I'm saying that, at a school level, if I say that, the entire element of the class learning has just not been transmitted, but a lot of practical orientation, the projects,
Right.
And this is not about the middle wing or the senior wing. They start from grade 1 itself.
Yes.
So we have been fortunate to have a great bunch of people who showed the willingness to adopt a new way of teaching. Thanks to parents who have understood, and I think credit goes to the student who have been very patient without going out, being there, attending the classes. But yes, we have to tweak certain things, but largely it's in good shape now.
Amazing. Mr. Saxena, a bunch of points that you highlighted, right? I think so. I completely agree with you. As a parent myself, I think we've been kind of reevaluating, the need for example, school, right? Because there are a lot of inefficiencies that are built around that ecosystem, right? And I think newer models like the one you kind of alluded to have actually taken over, right? And my sense is I think parents are ready today. That's on the school education side of it. We're going to talk more about that and college education also, right? Because I mean, like you said, right? I think we are headed into newer models, right? I think inefficiencies that were built around real estate focus, or the way we actually thought was that if you have to do right education, you cannot do it without real estate, and I think that's kind of gone away, right? And I think in your group, which is a fairly large one, you're kind of evangelizing the change, right? You're spearheading that change, and you're bringing in a lot of this, like I said, right? You're very dynamic systems in place which can act and react to the changing landscape of education. Mrs. Khanna, I'm going to move to a very important question, right? Early on in our conversation, and this is more specifically on the school education part of it, right? Because I believe that the transition and the change that happens there is going to be the most critical change for the next 20, 30, 25, 30 years of our country. Now, the expectation of the parent was that I have sent my kid to the school will take care of my kid, the growing up is going to happen, teachers are responsible, so on and so forth, right? In the change model, the parent has become a part of that ecosystem. The other thing is that they've started to question a lot more about what's happening, what's not happening. A lot what possibly happened in the class which was not visible is today visible. What's happening to the expectation, right? Is this has that changed? Has the parent become more demanding? Have they become more understanding of the complexities that are involved in the process of teaching? Where are we, right? And is this a strong, significant shift that you see, or do you believe that this is something which is going to go back to normal once, say, we are beyond this phase? I mean, Omicron is now being talked about, right? There's a lot of, we're kind of building defense around it, before it hits us the way second wave did. Well, what's the expectation of the parent? Where are we on that? And that's a very, very, that's the most important stakeholder in this entire scheme of things, right? Everything eventually has to be aligned to the parent. What's happening on that front? What is it that you're experiencing, your teachers experiencing from the Indian parent?
Very good question and very interesting question. So this is what happened exactly. I mean, since any school can claim that they have a great faculty and whatever the teaching pedagogy or the curriculum and everything. So the transparency sets in, and I think that's the biggest advantage that technology brings in, which is extremely heartening. And since we at our level connected with the parents directly, I do get pop-up messages. Sometime very good compliments about the faculty, and sometimes not so very encouraging as well, because the entire family is now seeing or attending the classes along with the kids, particularly when they are very young in age. Nursery kid or grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Grade 3 onwards, they are on their own. But till grade 3, I think the kids also needs a lot of supported families and parents who are working from home or whatever the situation may be. But then you are absolutely right when you say that the conditioning of virtual education is there, yes, but transparency is the key word. Nobody can claim that I have a great set of faculty if it is not, because at the time of admission, you may say whatever you want to say, but then parents have no access to come into the classroom and it's a physical mode. Today, Today, those walls have been fallen. So you've been exposed completely, not to the but to the entire family. And the word is also spreading very fast. I'm very happy, and at least in our schools, barring 2 or 3 negative feedbacks, largely it is very positive, and it is reflecting, and which is very encouraging from the point of view of the teachers as well, because until unless the interaction with the parents are all largely towards the PTMs, and it's a very standard way of telling about the learning outcomes of the kid. But today, it is very, very transparent, and I think that will bring a lot of quality, in education as well. And parent can see and feel, the difference what brings in, and how much effort teachers takes in the classroom, particularly in a virtual mode when you don't physically are present. It's a Herculean task, and a lot of credit goes to the teachers because they have adopted a newer way of teaching. They are aware or conscious about the fact that they have been watched, not by the parent, but the school principal or the management directly. So yes, so another thing is also, if I talk about at a macro level, it is, you have, good and bad of everything. So extra use of technology is also not very, very good. Because if you see, your daughter is 9-year-old, you said, and if you look at, this morning for 5-6 hours, they are completely glued to the screen. And subsequently some projects has to be done, and some other assignment has to be done, and so on and so forth. So it has to be a great mix. And so therefore we have tweaked our timetable accordingly to give a little breather to the students, and made it more project oriented and inquiry based learning rather than typical way of teachings out there. But yes, the transparency is the key word. The second thing, I think technology also brings the cost down, in terms of the physical infrastructure. As you said, people are moving away from the real estate. It may take a little while because it has to seep in very, very deeply into each other's mind, that because some education or some part of the education which is not practical oriented, you can teach, but sometimes the practical exposure has to be given in a physical format, and therefore the model has to be reinvented. Some initiative has been done, wherein you can have multiple the localized model wherein the student can go and experience those things personally, physical, in a physical mode, but teaching remains largely technology based. So you can save time, you can have both the hybrid model, and slowly, gradually, things started moving in one of the directions.
Interesting. Mr. Saxena, thank you so much for sort of doing that, right? Because I understand there are no clear answers, right? I think time will actually tell how far do we go, what are the challenges and so forth, right? Something very important that you highlighted in the point that you made, right, is the role of teachers, right? Now, when you look at teachers, that's where the real big challenge has been. Well, of course, kids are much younger, right? They adopt to technology faster. There's no inhibition whatsoever, right? Teachers were essentially tuned to do things in a certain format, right? If when you look at average age of teachers, right, that's typically you realize that it's 30 plus, 32, 33 plus, right? And with that they bring in the experience, right, which is required to sort of handle these kids, teach these kids, tackle these kids, right? How have they adopted to this, right? Because they were not necessarily prepared for an environment like this, right? They've not been digitally as savvy, and largely because, and not in a bad way, it's just that the work did not require them to be as, say, agile, that, for example, they have to be now, right? They were also not part of the scrutiny, for example, right, which could also mean that this entire constant involvement, intervention of parents could disturb their flow, right? Could disturb, can disturb or distort their methodology of teaching, right? That communication is also kind of gone awry, right? In a physical environment, you can tackle a kid because you understand a lot from the body language. In a virtual environment, it just becomes so much more difficult. How teachers reacted to this entire shift, right? And going forward, what are the things that you think? As an educationalist, right? Somebody who's really sort of championing this cause, right? And who's charting out new paths. What does the role of an institution becomes in the process of handholding these teachers, right? Are we talking about a new model of engagement with teachers where they'll possibly have to be tuned into technology before they're onboarded? What are we looking at?
So very interesting thing. So as I said, if you look at the complete school environment, you start from nursery till grade 12. And when you classify these teachers, they're also bracketed as far as the wings are concerned. So teachers who are primary wing, we are much younger and much more flexible to adopt new things. But as you grow older, when you become 40 or 45 or 50, the flexibility ratio comes down. And but hats off to all teachers. As I said in the beginning, teachers and technology were completely poles apart. They were just not comfortable at all. But in 1 month's time, when we all know that there is no absolutely way forward, and there cannot be, we can't afford to have such a learning loss of our kids. So the first thing is we have a joint meeting. We explain them about the platform which are available, how to be used, and multiple sessions of training has been done. Interestingly, a lot of motivational workshop also has been done. To motivate them that this is the only way forward. So yes, initial some challenges were there, not from the mental point of view, but from the workability point of view. But I think those things have eased out. All those wrinkles has been eased out very clearly now, and they are far more better placed in terms of using the technology and the newer platforms. So much so that a lot of labs which has been created online for physics, chemistry, and bio, which looks very unlikely, but those experimentation also has been shown online to the students, and to a great deal of success out there. So nobody actually speaking, if we talk about the metro cities, if we talk about tier 1 or 2 cities, have been pulled it off nicely. But again, I'm saying that this is tip of the iceberg. We have so many schools. We have such a vast country. The technology itself is not available at many places. So if you look at macro level, you will still find challenges. Technology does not mean that putting something on a WhatsApp group and thinking that we are teaching online. So it's all about having a live interaction with students and showing them the correct way. Lot of challenges came in the examination processes also, and we all know that the teachers and student would any day beat teachers in terms of using the technology, and there are very notorious minds to find it. So a lot of I would say advancement of technology also has happened, and we have engaged a couple of international firms to ensure that there is no such activity takes place while you're giving online exams. So it's an interesting phase wherein every day we are learning new things. And the good part is, again, I'm repeating, but the good part is the orientation is there, the inclination is there to take forward this journey. And every day there will be some new product which is coming up to enhance your vision to be in a virtual field.
Interesting. Mr. Saxena, you actually sort of walked into my next question, right? And I think it just becomes important. I mean, we've talked about the most important stakeholders, right? We've talked about the parent, we've talked about, the teacher, right? In this entire thing, and what, of course, I'd love to discuss the kid with you, but I think I'm going to do that in the newer model, right? That we're going to talk about, that you can introduce, right? What I want to particularly understand is, before we dive into that, is that what's going to be the assessment framework, right? Now, one of the things that like I said, right, the constant problem in the entire digital ecosystem is becoming where the teacher is not necessarily, can't really see the student in his or her entirety, right? There's a little assessment that they have, right? Or there is a little view that they have on the personality of the kid, right? Which essentially means that their ability to assess also gets restricted in the process, right? They can't help or handhold the parent into understanding the certain complexities in the nature of the kid, right? And that just becomes so much more difficult, right? For I think each of these stakeholders in the process, right? Do you think there's a newer model of assessment that we need to sort of bring in, given that we're talking about a very significant intervention of digital, going forward, right, or virtual education going forward? Do you think there are newer models of assessment that we'll have to look at? The assessments that we used to do, which was, say, for example, say unit tests, or these, the half yearlies and so on and so forth, right? And not just say school education, but overall, right, in the industrial education, which could mean higher ed as well. Do you think this entire assessment phase has to, the way we did assessments has to change, uh, and has to become so much more dynamic, right? How do you see that? Because I find it to be very, very complex when I'm sitting at a distance, right? I find it to be very, very complex, because, like I said, there is this handicap which is now coming. It's just got to be tangential in many ways. What is your sense of it? How do you read this?
So, last year when the first time when we started using technology, the assessments were very integral part, because otherwise very difficult to judge what you're teaching, how it has been understood. The first phase of I think I remember clearly, we started a unit test or all our exams, but it remained largely MCQ based. We could not know that, how a subjective assessment can be done in the first phase. And it may sounds very easy. The multiple choice questions are coming and you have just, have to pick one. But the question, that the way it has been framed, a lot of critical thinking and orientation toward the subject or the chapters were largely. So there were no direct questions were coming. It was a lot of indirect questions were coming, and we ensured that, but then again, MCQ is just not the way forward. And if you look at this year, even the board exams has been split into two parts. And the first part just got over yesterday itself, which was MCQ based.
Right.
And the second phase, which would happen sometime in March, which would be subjective, where the student have to write. But coming back to the original question, what you have said, when you are using technology, every equipment today is AI based.
Right.
And when you write a wrong spelling, or when you intend to write a sentence, the system is automatically completing the sentence. Right. So wherein we felt that, there is something seriously we have to do and think and reinvent this model of assessments very regularly. So a lot of focus which we have given on a verbal assessments as well. Surprise test, case study based thing, a lot of group discussion, extempore, giving the topic of the subjects and everything. So it's a journey. We still have not found the best possible way forward.
I can imagine. Right.
Truthfully speaking, but I must say that, as I said, the student one good lot is also pretty notorious, and they know how to crack, those firewall which has been put when assessment is on. So you have today platform which are available, which is again AI based. So even if I'm just not looking you directly at the screen, my screen will freeze. So many such things has come as an experimentation, and we have adopted every new leaf of whatever is available in the market to ensure that whatever you are doing the assessment in a virtual mode should not be very sugar coated and give a very a different results altogether, while the learning is not there. So in between also started inviting the student in a group to our schools to have a physical assessment, the test, and those things, just to ensure that the learning loss should not be there because of certain situations which are not in our control. So but it's a journey, it's a process. And we every day we are learning and learning new things, and I'm sure that there will be one permanent way we'll figure it out, which is just not our schools or India, but the worldwide, because the situation is moving across the globe accordingly. So in terms of the technology-based questions, we have used many other tools to assess. You are absolutely right. A teacher in the class of 30 or 35 students are sitting, knows by name and knows the strength and weakness of every child. And by asking certain questions, she knows that how much assessment has been done. But we also have engaged certain more platform wherein we are seeing that it's just not how much you are scoring, but how much the concept has been cleared. So those assessment we are focusing more, which has nothing to do with the syllabus per se. or nothing to do with your unit test or the monthly test or the half-yearly test. It is more, the focus is more on concept clearance. So when you are graduating from one class to another class or one wing to another wing, those assessment is a very, very integral part of our internalization of technology, and seeing that, is there any gap? So yes, and we figure it out that, a student who is scoring well, yet his concept has not been so clear. So we have realized that, where to plug these loopholes, and how to figure it out that, the students who are struggling to have the concept clearance, which probably in a physical mode is better than compared to the virtual mode. So you find out, and you give them some remedial classes and things like that. So, last year if you have seen that, 100% marks have been achieved in a board examination also.
Right.
Now, how do you justify or look at in a critical mode out there?
Right.
So probably next year, after grade 12th, whatever you may score, but when you have to appear in a centralized university examination, the marks will not matter. The concept or the fundamentals are more important.
Right.
So therefore, every school has to reinvent. I mean, we will not talk about that how many 90% or 95% or 98 or 100% student we are producing. We'll talk about how much concept we have been able to clear. So therefore, they are able to clear the entrance examination to get into a traditional graduation as well. Forget about the professional programs.
Right.
So I think we all have to wake up. Instead of working towards the marks, we have to give a lot of focus. And thanks to this pandemic time, or thanks to technology, we all have learned that this is the only way forward. Right. So I may be 80%, I may have scored 80% marks, but if my concepts are clear, my critical thinking is there, I know how to solve the case study based question in grade 10th onwards, I'm better off than so-called higher grade marks, because I know if I can clear the entrance examination, I'm the real winner, not the someone who has scored more marks but not being able to clear the entrance examination.
Interesting. I think, some very interesting points that you've highlighted, Mr. Saxena, and I kind of completely agree with you. I think concept-based understanding is just so much more important, right? I think one of the things that I've observed, and with my little one, and of course, with a bunch of other kids that are around us, is that they've started to register a pattern, right? What you highlighted is just so much more important, because, conceptualized learning is something which is not, for example, happening as effectively as it should, right? And that's largely because of the handicap, right? And lack of experiential, and something that I'm going to cover, right? But before I do all of that, we're going to talk about the newer model, right? And something which we've seen globally being discussed for quite an amount of time, right? And I think India, in India, it was being discussed across many quarters, right? And we've started to see some new emerging models of education, right? Especially school education, something that you are championing. We've heard of one such initiative that has come up. The other one is essentially led by you, right? Where you are now building the first virtual school in the country, right? I'd love you to give us a breakdown of that, right? Because, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, as a parent, I'm just so much more happier because the inefficiencies that existed, right? For example, say getting up in the morning, getting into that bus, getting to the school, right? Seasonalities, so much of other nuances, like they were around that entire model. I think this model is possibly going to take care of all of that, right? How excited are you about that, right? So I'd love you to give us a breakdown, and what is it that you anticipate next couple of years? How is this model going to shape up? I'd love to understand that.
So the blended learning is the way forward, certainly, and we have experienced with our existing group of schools. We are also coming out with a new school, which entirely based on the experience which we have earned in last couple of years, largely because of the pandemic, and we also have learned about the challenges around it. So therefore, and what we are trying to do is we are giving a two world exposure. So we are having our national curriculum framework based, which is CBSE. We are also offering the international curriculum, which is Cambridge, which is again mapped with the new education policy. Right. And within the focus is completely on project-based learning and completely on inquiry-based learning, or the experiential learning, which we talk about. Number one. Right. We have also realized that, while giving this kind of an exposure, the curriculum or the pedagogy, you also have to give you know the platform which are internationally recognized, which are very global in nature, so
Sure.
that a student who are coming in the school, and what we are seeing is a student who joins us in grade nursery in
Right.
2021 or 2022, he will pass out or graduate from the school 15 years after. So what
Right.
the world would have been after 15 years? What
Mm-hmm.
kind of an exposure as a school we can give, create an ecosystem
Sure.
which is in blended mode.
Mm-hmm.
So of course you need a physical exposure as well, whenever it is required and whatever the percentage of it is required. But the academic delivery can be in a virtual mode, and we also have decided to give laptops or the tablets to every student, so that there is a continuous learning happens at home, irrespective of the family challenges,
Right.
whatever they may face.
Incredible.
So as far as the curriculum, or as far as the exposure which we talk about, and also we are giving a lot of focus on skills which are important other than the typical syllabus which has been given by the boards to
Right.
cover. So so if you have the from robotics to your I would say the coding things, and these are the things which not start from grade 6 onward. These things will start from grade 1 itself. So there is
Right.
an innovation lab. In fact, happy to share with you, we are starting also an entrepreneurship for kids as a
Very
program,
interesting. Right.
which starts from grade 2 onwards.
That's incredible.
Because this generation has to see school life very differently,
Right.
and we all have seen that how technology evolution also will take away a lot of jobs, and you have to give that kind of a ecosystem in the school to make them ready for future.
Right.
And so the focus is largely on communication, on community building, on bringing, incorporating the compassion skills, and of course whatever the deliverables which are
Interesting.
required in terms of
Right.
the syllabus, whichever the board which you pick it up the students. Maybe slowly, gradually we'll move, say, a couple of days physical, maybe presence is important in the school, and a couple of days you remain at home, do your projects, come back, submit it again, if the
Right.
things are normal. But if things are not normal, you can completely be in a virtual mode, and as and when required, you can come to the physical form of the school, and do those exercises and projects, which school gives you those platforms in addition to whatever is available at home.
Very
So
interesting.
yes.
So, what I would have to understand, right? I mean, so are we talking about a very loosely built play, or which could have flexibilities, for example, which say the teachers can, and depending on the availability of the student, depending on, of course, the other dynamics, right? It could kind of be adjusted. Um, is this how we're going to be approaching it? I mean, I just want to understand for better clarity, right? Or is this going to be slightly more structured, right? In terms of, say, first, for the first 3, 4, 5 days you are there, for your lab classes, and a bunch of other things. You're going to be spending, say, 20 hours in a week in the school, right? Are we talking about a structure like that 40, 50 hours of learning across, say, a week, out of which 18, 20 hours is going to be, so where you've defined the engagement in a certain form and way, but it will still be flexible, right? Are we talking about a model like that? Because experiential, you know I am sure each one of us will agree, right, is just so much more important. And a lot of these factors that you kind of highlighted, right, that compassion, engagement, touch and feel, social nuances, right, they're just so much more important, right? Is this a model that we're kind of looking at, which is going to be, while of course there is a goal inside that it's going to have, but it'll still be flexible? The teachers will have the flexibility of assessing and evaluating a student in a digital environment, but and then you're filling in that gap, say, in a physical interaction, right? uh, in a way of flip class model sorts, right? Is this what we're looking at when you talk of what you do?
I think it is a need of the hour, number one. Two, instead of wasting a lot of time commuting to the school,
Right.
getting up early, commuting, and generally, 10, 15 kilometers away, the schools are there. So you invest a lot of time in commuting as well. So
Right.
why to do that? So there are two ways of looking at the things, and I think in India, if I talk about post NEP, the CBSC as a board has also giving tying up with a lot of giants, tech giants, with IBM to Meta everyone, and they're giving that kind of a platform to the school. But as I said, and I'm saying that it's a model which is evolving. We also have to be completely understand that you can't be really dependent on technology. You need a lot of socio-emotional development of a child. A lot of peer learning happens. A lot of team building is required. And when you talk about experiential learning, you are not doing a project in isolation. You are engaging a team. You are participating, discussing, and solving a problem which has been given to you. So a typical syllabus can be delivered online, but then when we talk about projects, when we talk about that ecosystem which has to be given, when we talk about the socio-emotional learning, those platform is also equally important. Right. And we are also giving exposure about mindfulness, your physical, your spiritual, your mental ability, because ultimately you have to we want to see everyone grow as a complete human being, not just a technology-based person who's just thinking, one direction. So you have to have a multi-dimensional personality around you. So if you look at India, we have 32 weeks in a year, which we have to deliver our program. And in these 32 weeks, when we decide that, 6 hours every day or 7 hours every day, the process is right now that, how much we can divide physically as far as the virtually. And what is it important, which is physically, and where we personally feel that, it's a physical environment is important for a child. Look at the child from last 2 years' time. They have not stepped out. Right. And they're at home and doing their competitive exams as well as their school education and so on and so forth. So more the platform which are coming does not mean that I take away the childhood from the students as well. So and we also know, as you said in the beginning, a teacher also doing better assessment while they see you physically in front of your eyes. So it's like today, it's just not about education. Today, even in the medical profession, the doctors are also doing the virtual consultations. Right. If you touch my pulse and you tell me, what exactly is the issue which I'm having compared to, I explain you everything and then you understand and suggest me. So there's always a difference. So it has to be very balanced approach. We can't get away with the technology, but we should also not forget about the other elements which are important during your childhood, during your school education, which to help you to build a complete personality. Right. So we are eyeing both the things. We wanted to create a great balance, but because of situation or any disruption which comes in, we will ensure that there is no learning loss. Those platforms are available. If you cannot come, those things are available. But if you can come, we would be very happy to welcome you in the campus and showcase you and give you an exposure of what we have built it up around us.
Interesting. Mr. Saxena, phenomenal. I think the way you're kind of approaching it is just so much more pragmatic, right? And like I said, right, there are no clear answers. We're a complex economy, right? We have a lot of cultural nuances that need to be factored in, right? And I think kid is absorbing a lot of that any which way at home, right? So I think we really cannot implement one model and which is going to suit everybody in the entire scheme of things, right? And I think it is going to take its own time, which you've kind of highlighted, right? Now, so when I do this, right, when I ask you this, of course, I am personally somebody who believes in this change, right? Also because I have that unique opportunity, a vantage point to talk to many people, understand nuances of the business, seeing the markets, for example, change, the expectation change, right? Which is essentially what is happening. There's still a set of people, and I'd say a large set of people who is, very strongly believe that all of what has happened in the last 1.5 years is essentially it's happened, right? There's nothing that they could have done about it. But what it's possibly, if we continue to live in a hybrid environment, what it'll possibly do is that, like you said, right, the kids are not, for example, there's a certain regimen that the kids follow, right? When you go into school, right, you get up on time, you're doing certain things, you're preparing yourself. There's a certain preparation, there's a certain institutionalization that happens in the process. Now, this particular segment believes that, what has happened is the entire growing up process, right, is actually gotten disrupted. The kids are not getting institutionalized, which essentially means the thought process and the process of thinking is not as structured, which essentially means that they might not necessarily be uh, able to fit well uh, in the in a demanding, say for example, role which they have to take up at a certain point, or let's say learning, even learning, right? The seriousness around learning, for example, they'll not be able to handle it because the current system or the current the adoption that we've had is essentially taking away that structuring of mind which is required. What do you have to say about this? This is not something which is, and I think you can give me an answer or a sense much wider than what's how you are tackling it at an institution, right? But what do you think about it as an educator, somebody who's been, like I said, right, who's been leading the way, who in many forms on and setting examples? What do you think about this?
Very interesting. I think you have touched upon a very interesting element, and I think earlier the parent used to think that let me pick up a best school,
Sure.
and it's a full responsibility to develop my
Right.
kids. Now, when you get up in the morning, when you get into a uniform,
Sure.
is a way forward, and these are the learning which are very indirect learnings out
Right.
there. I know that I have to wake up on time, I have to do my breakfast on time, I have to catch a bus, I have to be in uniform, I have to do my assignments on time, I have to attend. My attendance is extremely important. My assessments are extremely important. So this is a very structured way of my upbringing. Now suddenly you are asking me to wake up in the morning, and 7 o'clock, school starts, and I wake up from the bed and I start attending the classes out there. So I'm getting away from that discipline regime, which has been built up over years. And
Right.
suddenly every parent is concerned about it. So while we are welcoming the technology, but there are side effects. And therefore, I'm saying that, it's very important for all of us to understand that, school life cannot be get away or should not be forgotten because of the technology way forward. So parents are saying that, while having the breakfast, they're attending the classes. They do not get up on time. They go for a very late night sleeps and everything out there. So these are the things which are extremely, concerning for the parents. Um, and this is where we personally feel uh, uh, there has to be a balanced model with respect to the school education. And when you come to the school, there's a lot of peer learning happens. You are more in a physical way, and you look at today, the child gets up, sits at one corner of his house, keep attending the classes for 6 hours and everything. So there is no physical movement is happening. There's no strict regime he used to follow earlier is happening. And so yes, it's a, and then you keep eating throughout the day. So a lot of physical, I would say, negative attributes are also being added, and
Right.
so we need to be careful. And parents who used to think that the school is completely responsible for the development of a child, today we are developing more closely partnership with the school, and we say that like in our house, there is a strict rule that when you have to attend the class, you have to be in a uniform,
Right.
irrespective whether teacher has asked you to come to ask you to switch on your camera or not. But that discipline should not get away, and
Right.
that's where we are seeking a lot of support from the parent side. That do not allow your kid uh, to disturb the processes which has been created by the school, to
Interesting.
bring the discipline into the life. So
Right.
and bringing a discipline into the life is, I think, the first step towards education, which I think we all have compromised largely in last couple of years' time. So what we have done, we have to encourage parents, to encourage students. We have said that anyone who would be in the uniform throughout would be awarded, would be given a
Lovely.
certification.
Lovely.
The small little steps, and kids felt more motivated, in the morning to actually get up on time, be in the uniform, switch on camera, attend the classes religiously, and
Sure.
submit all assignment which has been given by the teachers, because there is no physical connect which is happening. But whenever In between, we have the opportunity to open the schools, campuses. We welcome the students, whichever the grade it was allowed. There are a lot of, apprehension we had in our mind that, they probably would not behave, after 2 years, they're coming to the campus. They
Right.
probably would snatch each other's mask and everything. Trust you me, not even one single incident has occurred. So this is another, uh,
Wonderful.
the side which we must highlight, that they all are aware about the situation. They all are aware that, of how important it is to remain vigilant in terms of the physical safety or hygiene is a concern, which is a good thing. But then, you look at them today, how physically they used to, and how they have become in 2 years' time. That's the
Right.
cause. So a lot of intervention which we have done, in terms of calling those experts of different domain,
Sure.
connecting with the parents and the student together, giving them a wider perspective about the life, and wherein again I'm stressing one point, that socio emotional learning is extremely important, and we played a very important role by having those experts, having a continuous dialogue and discussions. And when you talked about the assessment part as well, a lot of personality assessment also we have started at much advanced
Interesting.
stages, to understand the aptitude, to understand the philosophy the child has, and can we bring in that ecosystem to complement what he really wants to do in his life. So
You know,
these are the small steps which we keep taking, in order to create that ecosystem, which is
sure.
very micro level, which is very individualistic in nature, so that there is nothing one antibiotic can take care of everything. That's not the approach. The
Right.
approach is to handle every child separately, individually, and find a solution what he or she is looking for,
Totally
and
agree.
and with a very seamless relationship with our parents. And I'm really grateful and thankful that they all have understood and complemented,
Right.
and largely we have been able to cover the lost ground by being together in difficult times.
So, so I have, like I said, right, I speak with a lot of people, right, who are, within the, who are policymakers, right, and we keep talking about, what's happening and what's not happening, right, and trust you me, they do not, I mean, they understand some of the challenges, but they don't understand a lot of execution challenges, that the kind of ones that you're highlighting, right, and you're absolutely right. I think none of us at a distance, including us as parents, cannot fathom the kind of challenges that your team, the larger education system is grappling with. I think there is, I think our, the way we've been tuned is basically to expect output, right? And I think in an environment which is changed overnight, I think it's just so difficult. The way you kind of highlighted some of these smaller pieces, that you kind of, the way you're tackling this entire piece, right, is heartening to see, right? Because these smaller changes will bring in that larger effectiveness over a period of time. I think they'll possibly bring in that structure in learning and development. I think just so much more important, right? Uh, so one of the points that you highlighted, right, and I think which also becomes very important, if you look at global education, experiential is something which is very, very important. Um, India, it's kind of picking up. Within experiential, when you start looking at it, right, there's entrepreneurship which is now being blended in, right? Now, when we talk of entrepreneurship, we typically think of somebody starting a business, somebody doing a startup, something in technology ecosystem, right? But entrepreneurship is more about mindset. It's about uh, thinking about a goal. It's about aligning people, something that you kind of highlighted, right? It's about taking a certain responsibility for yourself, for your acts, and for a lot of it. It just brings you up and develops you as a very different kind of an individual. It also gives you a lot of confidence, right? In a model like the one you're talking about, right? Where, for example, parts of it is going to happen in digital format, parts of it is going to happen in a physical format. Digital is going to be a large, significant portion of the entire learning process. How important do you think entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial mindset would become to ensure that we have a more responsible outcome with these kids? I personally believe there's a lot of integrity that can be built in. There's a lot of honesty that can be built in. There's a lot of focus that can be built in when you start blending it within the education plan. Possibly that's the reason it's now being experimented much early on, right? Uh, which you also unique to you, which you're bringing in much early on. even the government is extremely sensitive to it, right? With Atal Tinkering Labs, they're also trying to sort of, stoke up that sensibility from the through the education system, right? In the citizens that come up. What's your sense of it, sir? How do you see it? And other part is, and I would want to bring in the challenge as well, is that when we talk of entrepreneurship, unfortunately, because of the middle class nature that we've had, a large middle class nature of the country that we've had, we don't consider it to be an important trait, right? But going forward, we are in uncharted territories, right? Businesses don't know how things are going to shape up, right? We are in a very, very, it's going to be difficult, right? As we go along, it's going to be a very the economic expectation is going to be very different. It's not going to be as, say, predictable. What's your sense of it, right? How do you see all of this? It's a fairly complex situation to deal with, right? What is your take on this? I mean, you've been a champion of it, right? You've been supporting it ever since. What's your take on it?
So I think very interesting question. So what happens in 2016 in one of our school, we thought that we want to bring entrepreneurship as a different element, and as you have rightly highlighted, the importance of being having the entrepreneurial mindset, which is extremely. And so I thought at a school level, anything, whenever you think out of the box, the first and the foremost challenge always remains to bring your internal team into the same platform.
Sure.
Because as educators, the teachers are aligned to one particular dimension. Right. And when you try to say that, this is something more different, the world is moving ahead and we have to give that kind of an ecosystem in the school. Sure. The first challenge is to satisfy and to convince them that why it is important. Right. And unfortunately, we do not believe in a very top-down approach that, one person will take a decision and then, right, whether it's been liked or not liked. So we try to have a very bottom-up approach. We try to bring the stakeholders together. And I remember I wrote a letter to EDI, Entrepreneurship Development of Institute, which is based out of Gandhinagar, the only entrepreneurial institute of India, that as a school, we wanted to integrate entrepreneurship program. And he wrote me back that, at a school level, he has said, I have never heard that anyone thinking about, anybody who's thinking about entrepreneurial education at a school level. So he invited me to the campus and he said that, let's have a discussion and how we can structure the curriculum and so on and so forth. So from there, we first start thinking about having the entrepreneurial education at a school level, number one. Right. CBSE fortunately started introducing as a skill subject entrepreneurship from grade 9 onwards. Mm-hmm. So we became the first school to take that as a structured syllabus. Lovely. But I always felt, and we together felt that, maybe it is a little late if we can have a much earlier exposure of entrepreneurial mindset. Right. Then by the grade 9th, they can be more focused, more inclined, rather than having just a theoretical understanding or the knowledge about the entrepreneurial education. So therefore, there's a very interesting global program called Entrepreneurship for Kids. It's a program started in Israel, which is improved by the Israeli government as well, which talks about entrepreneurial education from grade 2 onwards, and wherein small little things, the project which we are giving can be made beautifully, into a newer way of looking at things as for the way you are handling or giving the projects assignments. So there's a structured curriculum. There's a, which is about 20% theory, 80% of your practical experiences, which you give. And idea here may not be that, are you producing any entrepreneurs? That's not the objective. Objective is, you said rightly, to give the mind or the mental, affiliation towards the concept that, this is something a way forward. Right. We also know that, as you said very correctly, that not everyone has a great story when you start up a new organization. There are a lot of failures out there, but we need to talk about those failures to overcome from those problems, right, and find a new way forward. So we also have our existing schools have a Tinkering Lab with us, where the exposure starts from grade 6 onwards. We have entrepreneurship as a skill program where the focus starts from grade 9 onwards. But now we are taking it much, earlier age from grade 2 onwards, wherein such exposure can be given till grade 5. From grade 6 onward, you have adult tinkering lab to experiment a lot of things. And from grade 9 onwards, you have a structural curriculum as far as the board has given to us. So the process is complete from early age till the time you are there in the school. We also have tied up with certain adult incubation centers, which are entrepreneurial in nature. Students have an exposure to see how a pitch presentation is made.
Sure.
We invite entrepreneurs at our campus to give them exposure that how has been their journey, what challenges they have faced. And you never know that any student in the audience may get inspired and think. So every school typically we have seen is organizing a science exhibitions, but they pick up something from the books and try to make a model of it. What we are encouraging them to think out of the box, use your entrepreneurial mindset, use those ideas and create something which is extremely new. And as a school, we have even announced a seed capital up to 5 lakh rupees. If that idea has been liked by the investors or by the set of entrepreneurs, and where we see we can do the incubation. So near to our school, there's one Atal Incubation Center with BIMTech as an institute. So we have a MOU signed up with them. The student goes there, be a part of that incubation, see the journey themselves, and bring that experience back into the classroom. So be it teachers, students, or us, it's a great platform. It's a seamless platform, which again we try to give. So as I said, time is changing, and we have to give exposure, thinking that 15 years down the line, when they pass out of the school, the world would be a very different place to be in. This ecosystem, we sincerely hope will give them much more wider exposure when they can think on their own rather than thinking for creating a job for themselves. It's a creation of job for others. So small little efforts, we keep thinking and keep experimenting, keep involving parent, student, teachers, and see that how it is unfolding. And every year we try to incorporate some new elements, to bring more freshness into the whole concept out there.
Amazing. Mr. Saxena, we are towards the end of a conversation. Before I ask you my last two questions, right? I think, we haven't had the opportunity of covering the higher ed or higher education, piece that is part of your group, right? And I'm going to save that for our next conversation, right? I think it was, I think what we covered across this conversation is just so much more important, right? I think because, foundation level change, something that you're evangelizing, right, needs to be, it required the time that we spent, right, in the conversation today. And I think it's just so much more important because, like I said, I mean, there are many champions that are out there that need to be celebrated, right? And I think you're once a champion, who's identified the newer trends, who's solving for very local problems, who's solving for complexities that exist in learning. And I think making it easy for us as parents, right, in the entire scheme of things. So my second last question in this conversation: what are the next 2 years like, right? I would love to ask you a 5-year question, but I think 5 years is just too large a time. So what are the next 2-3 years like for you? What are the milestones that you've set, defined for yourself? The new school is coming up, the new model is coming up. Are we going to see this getting replicated across a lot of other areas? What is in the pipeline, right? What are you chasing?
So thankfully, I mean, the project which is now going to see the launch in April 2022 as a new school, which is coming up in Delhi NCR region itself. Fairly large, complex, knowing the challenges still, but we are bringing a lot of, I think, newer elements into education. Just not the international board or pedagogy or the global exposure, but also, as I said, a school would have its own hugely built incubation center, the innovation labs, which we talked about. We are talking about interdisciplinary education, so that, and a very storytelling format, wherein integration of technology in a very blended learning will happen. So right now the target here is with the new school is to it should be embedded with every possible newer features, which can see, next 10 years down the line. With our existing institutions also, other than the integration of technology, we're also adding more elements, thinking that how the pandemic has advanced the technology, and I think a lot of focus is on training and development. The lot of focus is on giving an exposure to the students about the emerging way of technologies and pedagogies. So the idea here in a school, you have 15 years time to give every possible exposure to the student which is required, unlike in a higher education where you have just 2 years or 3 years or 4 years kind of program. So here you start a journey from nursery, and you keep adding elements, which is very important as far the future is concerned. That's our part one of our thinking pattern. The second thing, whatever we do it, we focus a lot on the execution. It is not for the sake of saying that, certain thing you take the initiative and, use as a marketing tool. Our entire, I think, philosophy is to see to it that, small one step, but it has to be dealt very, very clearly, so that execution becomes the key out there. And every child who walks into the campus, every parent who places your trust on us, should feel satisfied that this is where we are making the difference. So the basic philosophy of the group, why we are in education, not for any other reason, but to bring that changes. And we, as leaders, we have to take certain steps to give much wider scope and the possibilities and the options. And happy to see that, students who have been traditionally trained are doing very well as far the competitive exams are concerned. Right. There are few who are doing very well as far the sports are concerned. There are few who are very well, doing very well in terms of, those online platforms are concerned. Right. So we tied up with, say, IBM Skill Build program. We have, which is again giving a lot of exposure to the students on multiple platforms. We are also inculcating the gamified learning, right. A very interesting way of I would say evolution has taken place, where you're teaching concepts in a very gamified mode. Right. So that's another things out there. So for us, we don't see short-term or long-term targets. We see that the journey is a continuous process, and right. every quarter or every year for us, how best we can integrate and how fast we can integrate. And as I said, the focus is more on execution. Beautiful. So, so yes, the strength of institutions probably will grow in next 2 years' time. We probably would start a couple of more schools, but this new school would be a flagship in terms of the integration of technology, as we talked about the blended learning, right. And the newer way of looking at the education to give a very global touch. So that when the student pass out of the 15 years from the school, they are ready to take on That's beautiful, right? That's beautiful. I mean, as a parent, it's heartening to see this motivation, right? Mrs. Sarah, my last question, and I would want you to use this as an occasion to communicate with many parents. You possibly have the opportunity of doing it for parents with who are aligned with you across your institutions, but I would want you to use this for, I think, all the parents. I mean, last 1.5 years, what we've experienced, we were never prepared for it, right? It's changed the way society, for example, behaved, right? It's changed the role of each stakeholder in the game, right? What is that one piece of advice that you would want to give out to the parents who are out there, right? Their role has become all the more important in this entire process of development, growth of their child. While of course schools still have a very important role to play, their role is become very pertinent in the entire process. What is that one piece of advice that you would want to give out to each parent out there, who's going to be listening to this for their kid, that you think is important going forward? So yes, so when we speak to our parents or we talk in general or particular to our parents, the one piece of advice or one piece of suggestion or one piece of request is always that how we can come together is a common responsibility. I mean, no school can do great in isolation, and no parent can forget the kids after putting their kids into a school and thinking that a school will do everything. It's a joint responsibility. The more we can have a seamless relationship, the more we communicate with them. And as a school, what we do is we have never closed the door for our parents. We don't say that come over during the PTMs and interact. We invite them for a coffee, about 10 odd parents, 15 odd parents, to have a one-to-one dialogue, a discussion, talking about every child greatly in depth, the strength and weaknesses both. We also try to understand the challenges at home, so that how we can overcome. As the socioeconomic development is taking place, as the parents are more working, they have lesser time for their kids. So instead of giving a materialistic love and showing that how you love by giving them the expensive gifts, we seek smile. And we say that 25-30% of the time when the kid is there with us, we will take care of it.
Right.
But necessarily, we have integrated many programs where the parent participation is extremely important, and we entice them so much that we say that the more you participate with us in whichever the form, we will recognize your efforts as well. So in terms of whenever they walk into the campus, for any purpose, even sometimes to help the school, to complement the effort which we are making, we do acknowledge, and end of the day, is the Parent of the Year award also goes to them,
Right.
to bring that healthy competition, at every level. So, jokes apart, the idea here is to have a very seamless relationship with them,
Right.
and they cannot just get away by saying that the school is great and we have put in our kid out there and the school's responsible.
Right.
And all the more it has become more important because of the pandemic, the kids are at home. The discipline angle has to be come directly from the parents.
Right.
When we see anything which is not good, in terms of behavioral aspects are concerned, and this is very impressionable age the kids are in.
Right.
They have to sound us off, and we come on board and try to take care of those things as much as possible. So every week we have a care call system with parents, and wherein we find out the overall development of the week, academically, non-academically, personally, and professionally, even financially. We invite them when the campus is open. We invite parents for a little longer discussions over a cup of coffee. Have discussions like we and you and I'm talking to you, and zero down to the more critical points which are important for the children to put out there. And I think this has helped us a lot to build that bonding with parents, and it has reciprocated well with the kids as well. So it's a happy ecosystem. We wanted to strengthen more in times to come by integrating more personal connect with them. So that's the only. So in the world of technology, the personal connect cannot be forgotten. I mean, that's some message which I had to give it to the parents.
I think you've beautifully summarized this, right? I think what is the most important part of this conversation essentially is what you kind of just said, right, in the last point that you made, is that constructive conversation is very, very important, right? And I think it's just so much more important for parents to put that trust, in the education system, in the people who are running and the leaders who are running the education system, right? That their kids are part of, vis-a-vis being transactional, right? Vis-a-vis being output oriented, which essentially is not the relevant way to do it, or the right way to do it, more importantly, because then the development is going to be assessed in a very different way. Development is an ongoing process, something that we kind of discovered and discussed through the course of our conversation, right? I mean, you have to put in that trust, which is just so much more important, right? And be there, be available, especially in the changing ecosystem, to be supporting the institutions to deliver much better. At the end of the day, institutions are equally geared to contribute to a strong personality, a strong student kid coming out, but just fundamentally sharp, smart, can handle the challenges of the growing ecosystem. Mr. Saxena, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I mean, this was a very interesting conversation. I loved every bit of this conversation. And somebody like you who's championed this cause, right? Couldn't have asked for better. I think what we discussed in the conversation, what I particularly loved is the newer models of learning that are now going to be adopted by education institutions, which is just so much more important for the economy that we're bringing and becoming. Where the expectations are also changing, right? Where kids will need that flexibility, will need that personality, right? And have to be conceptually much sharper and sounder, have to understand the application side of it, be responsible, honest, integrity becomes very, very important, right? So, and I think I love this entire narrative of what we discussed today, right? And the changing role of education institutions for our kids out there. So, sir, thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and I look forward to having you doing a much deeper discussion on higher ed, right? Something which I said and I mentioned is a critical part of what you do. I'd love to discuss that.
Thank you so much for your for inviting me, for having me with you, and patiently listening. Small steps, hoping that tomorrow the world would be a better place with a great integration of everything, whatever we or many others are trying to do in the
We wish
field
you
of.
all the very best, sir. We wish you all the very, very best, sir. Wherever we can contribute in whatever little way, we'd be more than happy to sort of do that.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much for doing this.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.